Greetings and peace. I would like to start this with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace be with you and yours. Today's presentation, I would like to talk about the aspect of Islam from the light of Theosophy, from Annie Besant's perspective. Annie Besant was a female Freemason and an occultist and spiritualist that was in the British Raj area, what we know as the modern-day India and Pakistan, and she had various interactions with that community over there, including the founder of Pakistan, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. And Annie Besant had written an article, right, Islam in the Light of Theosophy, since that was her background. And I wanted to do like a breakdown of this whole piece. So without further ado, thank you for joining me, and I represent myself only. A disclaimer that this presentation is provided for educational, historical, entertainment, free speech, and comparative religion discussion purposes. It examines ideas found in Annie Besant's lecture, Islam in the Light of Theosophy, together with broader historical interpretations and debates surrounding Theosophy, Islam, and intellectual history. It does not claim that all interpretations presented are established facts. Some subjects discussed in Theosophical literature, esoteric traditions, and revisionist historical writings remain disputed among scholars. Now, readers and the viewers and listeners in this presentation are encouraged to consult primary sources and academic research. Introduction, Islam and Theosophy. Annie Besant's 1910 lecture sought to present Islam through a quote-unquote theosophical lens. Rather than treating Islam as a rival religion, she emphasized shared ethical and metaphysical themes, portraying the faith as a participant in humanity's wider spiritual quest. The lecture argued that Islam encouraged learning, philosophical inquiry, and interreligious understanding. Besant attempted to challenge common Western stereotypes regarding Islam and to place Muslim civilization within a universal history of wisdom. A historical context for this lecture is that it appeared during the British Raj, a period marked by colonial rule, religious reform movements, and debates about national identity. Theosophists often promoted comparative religion and searched for common truths across traditions. Besant addressed audiences in India where Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Parsis, and others lived side by side. Her appeal for mutual respect reflected both spiritual ideals and practical concerns about social cohesion. The Prophet and Knowledge. Annie Besant highlighted traditions attributed to Prophet Muhammad that praised the acquisition of knowledge. The lecture presents learning as an act of devotion and a path toward moral and intellectual refinement. According to the lecture, knowledge distinguishes truth from error, guides individuals through difficulty, and elevates society. Besant used these passages to argue that ignorance cannot fairly be attributed to Islam's foundational teachings. The ink of the scholar. A major theme is the famous saying that the ink of the scholar is more precious than the blood of the martyr. Besant treated this statement as symbolic of a civilization that honored intellectual achievement. She argued that Muslim societies historically produced scholars, scientists, philosophers, and educators whose influence extended far beyond the Islamic world. And great examples of that is the Islamic Golden Age and also the Moorish Islamic presence in Spain that brought Europe out of darkness into the Renaissance. Ali and the Nature of Science. The lecture quotes Imam Ali's description of science as the enlightenment of the heart, guided by inspiration and accepted by reason. This synthesis of intellect and spirituality resonated strongly with theosophical ideals. Besant suggested that authentic knowledge unites rational investigation with ethical purpose. Science and spirituality, in this interpretation, need not be enemies. Islamic civilization and learning. Besant argued that Islamic civilization preserved and developed major intellectual traditions after the decline of classical antiquity. She emphasized centers of learning in Baghdad, Cairo, and other cities. In her account, Muslim scholars transmitted philosophical and scientific knowledge that later contributed to European intellectual renewal, the Renaissance. The Moorish contribution. The lecture celebrates Muslim Spain as a bridge through which mathematics, astronomy, medicine, architecture, and other disciplines entered medieval Europe. Besant described universities, libraries, and scholarly exchange that attracted students from across Christendom, the European world, and she portrayed Al-Andalus as a major center of civilization. Science and the European Renaissance. Besant connected Islamic scholarship to developments that helped prepare the ground for the European Renaissance. She cited mathematics, trigonometry, astronomy, and agriculture among the areas of contribution. While modern historians debate the precise scale of individual contributions, the broader role of Islamic civilization in preserving and transmitting knowledge is widely recognized. Islam in India. The lecture praises the architectural and cultural achievements associated with Muslim dynasties in South Asia. Besant viewed these contributions as part of India's shared heritage. She argued that artistic traditions influence one another and that cultural achievements should not be confined within sectarian boundaries. Metaphysics and common ground. A central theosophical theme is that religions share deeper metaphysical principles beneath external differences. Besant believed Islamic philosophy and Hindu Vedanta possessed important points of convergence. She encouraged translation and study of Muslim philosophical works so that broader audiences could appreciate their intellectual richness. Interfaith understanding. Besant repeatedly called for cooperation among Hindus, Muslims, Christians, and Zoroastrians. She argued that mutual respect was essential for a healthy society. Rather than advocating conversion, she promoted understanding, dialogue, and recognition of the spiritual sincerity of different traditions. In the Quranic perspective, the lecture rejects the claim that Islam teaches women have no souls. Besant cites Quranic passages emphasizing moral accountability and spiritual reward for both men and women. She interpreted these verses as evidence that men and women stand on equal ground in relation to salvation and religious responsibility. Polygamy in historical context. Besant addressed the issue of polygamy by placing it within the social conditions of 7th century Arabia. She argued that reforms often occur gradually rather than instantly. Her discussion reflected early 20th century comparative social criticism and should be understood within its historical context rather than as a definitive contemporary analysis. Law, property, and women. The lecture contrasts certain historical Islamic legal protections for women's property with restrictions that existed in parts of Europe during earlier periods. Besant used these comparisons to challenge assumptions that social progress followed a simple East versus West narrative. Islam and the question of tolerance. Besant disputed portrayals of Islam as inherently a religion of persecution. She emphasized Quranic passages advocating wisdom, dialogue, and recognition of earlier prophets. She argued that the actions of followers should not automatically be equated with the teachings of a religion's founder. Universal religion and theosophy. Theosophy frequently proposed that all religions express aspects of a universal wisdom tradition. Besant interpreted Islamic teachings about surrender to the divine will in this broader framework. From this perspective, spiritual traditions become complementary paths rather than mutually exclusive systems. And in the Holy Quran, Surah 2, verse 62, Allah does say that it doesn't matter what specific religion you follow as long as you're an upright, righteous human being. And all of these paths are teaching you surrender and submitting to the divine will. And one who submits to divine will is by definition a Muslim. Annie Besant and Indian Muslims. Besant's political and educational work brought her into contact with many Muslim leaders during the late colonial period. Her advocacy of self-government and national awakening attracted support across communal lines. Although opinion about her varied, she often sought dialogue between communities and emphasized shared civic aspirations. Besant and Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Historical accounts note that Muhammad Ali Jinnah, or what we know in Pakistan as Quaid-e-Azam, the founder of the country, interacted with Annie Besant during the constitutional and political debates of the British Raj. Some later narratives describe a relationship of mutual respect and occasionally reference the affectionate title Amma in recollections. And Amma in the Urdu and Hindi language is basically giving someone a motherly respect, a motherly title, since Amma means mother or grandmother. Such claims should be evaluated through careful examinations of documentary evidence, but they illustrate how Besant became a significant figure within broader Indian political circles. And keep in mind, even Besant being a female Freemason and the whole British presence at that time, even Muhammad Ali Jinnah, right? He has like a picture of him doing the hidden hand symbol where he has his hand inside the coat, right? Which showcases him possibly being a Mason as well, and how they were all connected, even with Aga Khan III, who was with Aga Khan III, to continue from the previous slide, who was the Ismaili leader, and he also was a Mason, and how collectively that whole circle, right, of the spiritualists and the religious people and the Masons and those that were connected to the British royals, how they were able to create a separate secular state for non-Hindus, right? Where if you look at Pakistan today, the Christians, Hindus, Muslims, everyone is there. Sikhs are living peacefully. Whereas in India today, the Hindu extremists are giving everybody a hard time that is a non-Hindu. So that was their political theory at that time, to create a separate state for non-Hindus, which, with today's climate has been proven true. So as we move on with Madame Blavatsky, right, Serapis Bey, and the esoteric narratives. Now, Helena Petronova Blavatsky, who was like a big Theosophy founder, right, and a respected leader in that community, wrote about spiritual teachers or masters who guided aspects of her esoteric development. Among figures appearing in Theosophical traditions is Serapis Bey. Outside mainstream scholarship, some writers have speculated about historical identities behind esoteric masters. One recurring claim equates Serapis Bey with Jamal al-Din al-Afghani, who was also a Freemason and a Sufi master, describing him as a Sufi and a Masonic influence. However, this identification remains speculative and is not established academic consensus. But we all know what the truth is at the end of the day, and how even Blavatsky refers to having a teacher in Cairo who was Serapis Bey, Jamal al-Afghani himself, from the Hermetic Brotherhood of the Luxor, right? Jamal al-Afghani and Reform. Jamal al-Din al-Afghani was a major 19th century Muslim intellectual associated with anti-colonial thought, reformist discourse, and transnational political activism. His connections to diverse intellectual networks, including discussions involving modernity, religion, and political organization, have inspired numerous interpretations from historians and esoteric writers alike. Deconstructing Eurocentric readings of Theosophy. Critics argue that Theosophy is often narrated through a predominantly European lens, focused on Blavatsky and Western institutions. Such approaches can understate the influence of Asian, Middle Eastern, and Islamic intellectual traditions. A broader perspective recognizes exchanges among Indian reformers, Muslim thinkers, Buddhist teachers, occult networks, and anti-colonial activists who helped shape the movement's development. And even now, the headquarters is in India, right? Islam, Theosophy, and intellectual exchange. Viewed comparatively, Islam and Theosophy intersect in discussions about universal truth, ethics, symbolism, metaphysics, and the search for wisdom across civilizations. Whether one accepts theosophical claims or not, the historical encounter between Islamic thought and theosophical interpretation offers a valuable case study in cross-cultural intellectual exchange. Conclusion: that Besant's lecture here presented Islam as a religion that values knowledge, ethical conduct, and spiritual aspiration. Her broader goal was to encourage respect among communities and challenge simplistic prejudices. More than a century later, the text remains a revealing document of comparative religion, colonial era intellectual history, and efforts to build bridges across traditions. So, on this topic, references and further study, I recommend just looking at the history of Theosophy, looking up Jamal el-Afghani, Madame Blavatsky, Islamic philosophy, of course, Annie Besant's Islam in the Light of Theosophy from the Theosophist publication of 1910. I'm sure if you look that up, you'll find the PDF. And also just research the colonial era movements, interfaith dialogue, and just intellectual Islamic history, especially South Asian political history. And you'll find much reference in terms of what Besant is discussing here. Thank you so much for watching. If any questions or comments, please email me at salmansheikh911@gmail.com. And of course, all my work is protected under the copyright laws of fair use for the purpose of nonprofit, free speech, education, and entertainment purposes. Thank you. All rights reserved.